All right, welcome to the State of Part 107 webinar. My name is Ryan. I am a Consumer Enterprise Specialist here at Multicopter Warehouse. Joining us, we have Jason from Remote Pilot 101. And in this webinar, we're going to go over the state of the Part 107, just as it says. This is going to kind of help you out with your Part 107 test, allow you to kind of do more commercial drone shoots. And if you guys have any questions along the way, make sure you type them in the question box. But let's go ahead and get started. So what we do here at Multicopter Warehouse is we're authorized dealer and repair shop, specializing in search and rescue, agriculture, construction drones, all of the above. We also have a storefront here in Centennial, Colorado, where we sell all the DJI products. Taking over for us today is going to be Jason from Remote Pilot. If you guys have seen his course, he has quite an extensive course for the Part 107 that you guys should definitely check out. We will drop a coupon code for you guys at the very end of this webinar. But without further ado, I will pass this over to Jason to start us off.
Awesome, Ryan. Really appreciate you, man, for sharing that. Thank you for everybody. You're taking time out of your busy work days and everything else. I know we're living in some crazy times right now, but I'm excited to be with you all. Ryan, if you'll make me a presenter too, you already did. Thank you. There is my screen. You guys can see all of that. Ryan and Carrie and just the team at Multicopter Warehouse have been a blessing to our business. They may not even know this. They were really way back before Part 107 was even a thing. We're running off of 333s and everything else back in the olden days, as my 5-year-old would say when she thinks things are really, really old. She says the olden days. But back in the olden days, Multicopter Warehouse and Carrie were one of the first people to reach out to us and say, hey, you guys have something here. We looked at them and said, you guys have something there. And you guys were actually our first partner. You don't even realize that. First promo code we ever put out, and it's the same promo code you still share to this day. And it's our most fruitful promo code as well. So just thank you for that. This, by the way, is an interactive webinar, and I know you can't see me right now, but I want to interact with you all. So don't hesitate. I can see the questions. I can see the chat as well. I'll be sure to keep both of those open as well, just so I can see what you all are up to. But I'm excited to be with you all. My game plan for today is just to, first off, share some great questions. I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't go and, of course, share some of the popular Part 107 questions from the recurrent test, from the initial test as well. So we'll be doing a little bit about that. And then, of course, I'll be sharing a little bit more about what's coming for Part 107. And not to let the cat out of the bag, but of course, I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about remote ID and UTM and all these things that everybody wants to know about. So we will be sharing about that as well. And I also have a big prediction I want to make on beyond visual line of sight operations as well. This is just the beginning of some great stuff if we're all willing to play by the rules the FAA gives us. Don't freak out with remote ID. More on that here in a second. Let's dive into it, though. Let's get started. I want to start with 3 of what I believe are the more difficult questions on the Part 107 test. This first one actually comes from the initial test. And it starts off like this. Refer to figure 15. I'll show you figure 15 here in just a second. How does the weather change from 2200 Zulu to 0200 Zulu? And the answers are, is it lightning will start? Will the ceiling perhaps drop from 1500 to 800? Or will the skies become clear? All right. Again, this is from our actual test here. So I'm going to leave this figure up here for you, and I'm going to let you guys go ahead and check that out and see what you think. But we are looking at a TAF. You all remember that a TAF is it's like its own aviation language in a way, right? So let me put the options up there again. We're looking at from 2200 Zulu to 0200 Zulu. Was it lightning will start? The ceiling drops from 1500 to 800? Or was it the skies become clear? I'm going to give you guys a second to go ahead and work through that, and let's see how I can see if you want to type in some responses or whatever you want to do here in the chat or whatever that may be, so I can see some of those. But let's go, let's work through this here together. Do you think lightning will start? The ceiling's going to drop from 1500 to 800. Remember the FAA definition of a ceiling. Or will the skies become clear? Work through it and let me know what you think there. This is the hard part for me, where I have to be quiet a little bit and let you guys try to work through everything. Let's read it. Let's work through it here a little bit together. So again, we're looking at a TAF. A TAF is a terminal aerodrome forecast, is what it actually stands for. We're looking at FM from 2200 Zulu. These will be the conditions. And then from 0200 Zulu, these will be the conditions. So let's read through this here together. Winds are from 330. Remember the first three is our direction. So from 330 at 15 knots, gust to 20, gust to 20 knots. All right, this is some serious wind. Like this is already like a no-go, I'm not flying kind of day, whether that's an unmanned or a manned aircraft at this point. The P means greater than 6 statute miles of visibility. The reason that is the case is because the definition of an aerodrome, remember it's a terminal aerodrome forecast. The definition of an aerodrome is 6 statute miles. So they can only tell you it's greater than that. It might only be 7 statute miles, which is still really crummy visibility. It might be right at 6. It just says greater than 6 statute miles visibility. So continuing to read here. Broken clouds, 1500. Overcast clouds, 2500. Prob 40. A prob 40 means there's a 40% chance these will be the conditions. And between what times? Between 2200 and 0200 Zulu, these will be the conditions. 3 statute miles visibility, SH is showers, RA is rain. From 0200, the winds are from 350 at 12 knots. Overcast at 800. And again, I'm sorry I didn't explain that earlier for those of you who may be looking at this going, Jason, you're losing it. I don't even know what you're talking about right now. And that happens. That's okay. Overcast clouds, OVC, at 800 feet. Now, it's 800 feet because the 8 is over here in the hundredths place. If the 8 was over here, it'd be 8,000. If the 8 was over here, it'd be 80,000. You follow me with that? Then there's another prob 40. There's a 40% probability that between 0200 and 0500, we use Zulu time, these will be the conditions. I'll read through them quick. 2 statute miles visibility. Light is the minus, RA, light rain, and SN is snow. Sounds like a fantastic day, right? Light rain and snow. Becoming between these times of 0600 and 0800, 020 at 8 knots, broken at 1200. Everybody follow me. So what did we see? Did anybody hear anything about lightning? I didn't hear a word about lightning. Did we hear anything about the skies becoming clear? No, I thought they became worse, actually, right? We're getting some light rain and some snow, just kind of crummy visibility, perhaps. Did the ceiling drop from 1500 to 800? The FAA definition of a ceiling is the lowest broken or overcast layer. The lowest broken or overcast layer. Here's an overcast layer at 25. Here's a broken layer at 1500. We go down to 0200, we see an overcast layer, also a ceiling. The definition of a ceiling is the lowest broken or overcast layer. The ceiling drops from 1500 to 800. B is your correct answer. I know a bunch of you are going, I haven't seen TAFs in a long time, and I get it, and they quiz us on it, and I know we can translate these things and interpret them, but this image you're seeing is the actual image you're seeing on your knowledge test. So I just want you to be so aware of that and just ready for that as well. Let's keep moving forward. Let's look at another one here. An ATC radar facility issues the following advisory to a manned aircraft pilot flying north in a calm wind. Unmanned aircraft operations at 9 o'clock, 2 miles. Where should the remote PIC and crew, if applicable, look for this traffic? To the west, to the east, or to the north? Think about it here. And again, this is probably one of my favorite questions to pull, and you'd be amazed at the amount of students who write into us and tell us, oh, I had that exact question on my knowledge test. It is no doubt a serious, trick question there. Let's work through it again. Let's read through it again here. An ATC radar facility issues the following advisory to a manned aircraft pilot flying north in a calm wind. Unmanned aircraft operations at 9 o'clock, 2 miles. So where should the remote PIC and the crew, if applicable, look for this traffic? I, like many of you on here, I am a visual learner here. So let me go ahead and let me just kind of draw it out and show it for you so you can see it here. First off, let's draw where north is. Let's just spell it out. To make life easy, let's just say that north is up, so everybody knows and understands that. Then the airplane is what's actually heading to the north. It said the aircraft is flying north in a calm wind. We don't need details on why a calm wind, but that is important in manned aviation. All right. Now, when ATC issues traffic advisories to manned aircraft, they give it to us in reference to a 12-hour clock. So you can see 12, 1, 2, based on where that actually is. So where was the drone actually? Well, you can see they said it was at 9 o'clock, so off the left-hand side. What was the answer you guys thought? Was it A, B, or C? Read it just a little bit more. Our correct answer is out to the east. Why is it out to the east? Read the last little bit of this. Where should the remote PIC and crew, if applicable, look for this traffic? That's where everybody slips up. Everybody thinks, oh, it's where should the manned pilot look for the drone traffic? And that's not the case. They flip the question at the end. They get you all engrossed with all this talk. And at the very end, it's where should the remote PIC and crew, if applicable, look for this traffic? You're over here. You look back to the east for that traffic. You follow? That is so tricky. It just goes to show you, you have to slow down. Again, this question, by the way, this question is on the initial and the recurrent test as well. By the way, Carrie or Ryan, I hear one of the phones. I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna get Carrie off the line here. I think he's
no problem. Next question here. I'll kind of keep moving forward here. Last question, then we'll dive into what's really happening with Part 107 and everything else here. You are conducting SUAS operations northeast of a nearby airport. While monitoring the CTAF, an aircraft announces that it's departing runway 36 and utilizing a right traffic pattern. Will the aircraft potentially conflict with your operation? And your options are, yes, the aircraft may overfly northeast of the airport. No, the aircraft will be flying on the west side of the airport. No, the aircraft will be flying to the south of the airport. All right, so you're conducting SUAS operations northeast of a nearby airport. You're monitoring the CTAF, and aircraft announces that it's departing runway 36. I'm a visual learner, like I said. I need to see it. So first off, let's draw the runway. 36 is a north-south runway. 3618 is that piece of pavement. We know that runways have their orientation in relation to a magnetic compass, magnetic headings, essentially. 36 is actually at the bottom of this, because you have to remember, if the aircraft is taking off 36, that means that sitting on the runway right down here to take off, his or her compass says I'm on a heading 360 for runway 36. So they are actually down over here is where they are. So this end of the runway is 36. This end of the runway up here is actually 18. Let's draw it out now. So this manned aircraft takes off, runway 36. He's utilizing a right traffic pattern, as we learned. So he's going to go ahead and he's going to turn right crosswind. He's then going to turn right downwind, right base, and then finally he's going to turn final. We are doing our operations out to the northeast of this nearby airport. Do you think there's any potential conflicts? Again, it's totally dependent on what we're actually doing, but the correct answer is, you can see it here, yes, the aircraft may overfly to the northeast of the airport. And again, I know these were 3 super challenging questions here, but I just wanted to work through and kind of, share some of those so for the initial test. And if you are thinking about taking action on your Part 107, I'm not here to give you a sales pitch by any means. I'm here to just give you good information. But Remote Pilot 101 has your back to help this make sense of all this craziness and all this sort of stuff out here. We are just we're here to serve you with all that. So I know you didn't come here to be quizzed, although it's super fun, and that's a passion of mine, is sharing these difficult test questions and then sharing the whys. I love sharing the whys behind it. But you came here to learn more about what's happening with Part 107. So I just want to take the remainder of my time with you guys to really share what's coming, what's in the pipeline. And even with all this craziness we have in the world with the coronavirus and everything else that's going on, all of this stuff is still coming. They may have tapped the brakes on it a little bit because they were out a few months. The FAA, that is who I'm speaking of, but it's still all coming. Here's the first thing, and I'm willing to go on the record, and Carrie and Ryan hold me to it, because I truly believe we're going to see this happen. I believe within a year of this recording, let's say, well, we're live now, but you may be watching this on YouTube, but in a year of us doing this, we will see beyond visual line of sight in a much easier format than it currently is.
So
without
before
the
next
waiver
summer.
process and everything else. I believe beyond visual line of sight is going to be something that's here. I believe it's something we can fully utilize now, whether it's an additional test we have to take, like an additional rating we can earn or anything like that. I believe we will all be able to utilize beyond visual line of sight operations within 12 months. And it's going to start out with the big guys. It has to happen. It has to happen for this package delivery to work. Actually, a little bit south of us in the Villages, it's this huge retirement community. During the coronavirus, they've been doing, and we just had a post on it not too long ago, and I'm sure you guys have seen it, on doing drone delivery of pharmaceuticals to the retirees of the Villages who are, it's not safe for them to go out or go to the pharmacy, and they're just launching from a CVS, and they're doing drone deliveries. They're within visual line of sight right now. They're not going very far. However, beyond visual line of sight operations, it is coming, and it is coming very, very quickly. So certainly be watching, be ready for that. The big thing that is freaking everybody out is remote ID. Remote ID is here to stay. I'm sorry to say it. Let's talk about the pros and cons of it, and I'll share the big buzzword on top of that is what I want you to really know and understand. But remote ID, many people call it the killer of hobbyist dreams and everything else. And there is some truth to this. If your only desire is to just stay a hobbyist, I don't want to do anything else. However, even if that is just the case, it would behoove you, it would benefit you to go out and earn your Part 107 regardless. Because if you earn your Part 107, you can do Part 107 operations, you can play with the remote ID rules, you won't be crushed like many hobbyists will, unfortunately. I mean, could you imagine only having to fly your drone at AMA fields and these sort of things if we didn't want to abide by remote ID? A very similar thing happened many, many years ago in manned aviation. They issued something called a Mode C transponder. And a Mode C transponder was just allowing ATC to see our altitudes. Believe it or not, ATC couldn't always see our altitudes. They could just see a primary radar target, and they had to rely on the pilots saying they were at the right altitudes. So they made everybody install these Mode C transponders. And there was a big mandate, and everybody, they're watching us, they're stalking us, they're doing all these things. And it was expensive to install these transponders. Now we have ADS-B that we just had to install effective January 1 of 2020 in all our manned aircraft. It's expensive, but it's there to make us safer. The remote ID can ultimately make the airspace much safer, you have a license plate on your car, and the appropriate authorities can pull that data and everything else. I know everyone is worried, everyone's freaking out just about the privacy issues and everybody knowing when I'm flying and where I'm flying and who has access to this. And by the way, it's a monthly fee now of like $2 or $3, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is that per drone? Is that per user? Is that per pilot? Per operation? Those are the answers we just don't have right now. But remote ID is coming. We had our opportunities to put in our on the request for comment and put in our comments on it. And we're going to continue to see that adaptation. But let me tell you, the buzzword you really need to be watching for, and the buzzword that I'm most nervous about is UTM, which is essentially our unmanned traffic management. What UTM, and there was an email about this, if you get the FAA emails, and I'm sure you do, not too terribly long ago, one of the first times I saw the FAA come out and talk about UTM. We at Remote Pilot 101 have known about UTM for quite some time and been telling you all about it, because this is where the airspace can get taken over and monopolized very quickly. UTM is really how these big companies are going to make package delivery work. UTM is a bidding system for airspace. Imagine out of an Amazon warehouse, they literally have these pipelines. They would pipelines of airspace. Let's see, they're fictitious, but you see what I mean. And there's all these routes they have. Well, these drones are going to fly these particular routes. They're going to reserve the particular airspace. That airspace will be off limits to anybody else when the drones are back and forth in these airways. We are making drone highways in the sky, if I had to say what UTM is. Now, the problem is it's going to be a bidding process to get these highways in the sky. Hey, tomorrow at 3, I need to use this route at this particular altitude, so if I can have that, great. And I would bid on it. I'd get a yay or a nay back, and that would be my route. As you can imagine, Remote Pilot 101 may be a big company, but we're nothing compared to, Amazon and Airbus and all these big companies that have been testing this and really, forget testing it. They are the creators. As you saw in the email last week, they are on the board, the advisory board, making UTM. Unfortunately, we applied. They weren't taking too many small mom and pop companies to give their input on UTM. It was just the big guys who are really going to be paying for the airspace. Remote ID doesn't scare me. UTM scares me. And I certainly don't want to give you any of my biases or anything like that. I want you to be informed and come to your own conclusions. But UTM is the thing we need to keep an eye on. And when that request for comment comes out, we need to really make sure we are staying on top of that, because it's UTM that could really clog up our national airspace system. So that's what I want you really watching and just keeping an eye on with that. Right now we have our Lance system, and our Lance system is phenomenal. I am so thankful. I mean, I remember how difficult it was to get approvals. I was one of those that waited 120 plus days for a authorization for a Class D airport right here in my home of Ocala, which has no commercial traffic. I mean, when I say commercial, like major airline traffic, it's just general aviation, private jets, that sort of stuff. It's not like this well-to-do airport by any means. 120 days plus to get an approval. And it was only good for 90 days. We since resubmitted, got it for 2 years. Everything else now with Lance, we don't even bother with it because it's so instantaneous to get approval. But do you know how this Lance map was actually created? I have many friends who are air traffic controllers, many of them the supervisors of their facilities, and they said, we knew drones were going to be a thing in our airspace, and we had to figure it out. The controller said, one day every control tower around the country got a map of their airport with all these squares around it and blanks. And they're given the instructions, please put a number from 0 to 400 on this to what altitudes you would give instantaneous permission to drone operations if they stayed at or below those particular altitudes. So obviously you can see the zeros here, right? But you can see the runway orientation for this particular one runway airport. They want to keep everybody away. They keep the hundreds around here to kind of keep it close for the traffic pattern, and it expands out from there. But it sounds ridiculous. That's how the numbers on this Lance system came to fruition. It was just whatever controller was on duty that day, whatever supervisor was on duty that day, sat down with their pencil and wrote in a bunch of numbers in every single little block while drinking their cup of coffee and said, yeah, I think I'd approve this. I think this sounds good. Put it back in the self-addressed envelope and send it back in. And then this data got inputted. That's why certain airports got Lance before others, because it was literally just waiting for controllers to send back the data. And then the FAA to input all that data. That's why Lance didn't roll out, if you remember, as one seamless system. Remember, Lance rolled out with like 10% of the nation's airports, then 20%, and it kind of grew from there. That's actually how that process occurred. Again, Lance is an awesome system, yet it was created by a bunch of controllers who are great people, but probably not drone pilots and probably not even manned pilots as well. There's some that are, and I give them a ton of applause for that. Some are both manned and unmanned pilots, and I love those controllers. But that's how we came to our Lance system. So I just want you to be mindful of that, that will Lance go away with UTM? I don't know those answers, but there's going to be a shift here that either the Lance system is going to win or the UTM system is going to win. Those are answers that I do not have yet, unfortunately, but you know I keep my nose to it and will always be searching to find those answers most certainly for you all. But I thought it was a fun, interesting fact of how the Lance system and how our airspace system really works, so you all get a better understanding of it. So today we went through 3 actual initial and or recurrent test questions. We talked about how beyond visual line of sight is very much going to be a thing and accessible to the masses. We talked about how, again, don't give in to the remote ID hysteria. If you are willing to play by the rules, remote ID is just another formality and another rule to play by. This is not the Wild West. If you want to operate in the Wild West, remote ID is going to be a pain in your butt. If you don't want to play by the rules, remote ID is going to make your life very, very difficult. But if you're willing to play by the rules, don't worry about remote ID. What I want you to worry about, and I'm not one to worry, but I might better say what I want you to keep an eye on is UTM, or unmanned traffic management. And I only worry about it because you got Amazon and Airbus and a lot of really big, T-Mobile, I think, a lot of really big companies that have a lot of reason to want to monopolize the airspace. Again, just my professional opinion with that, but that kind of concludes my presentation here. I would love, I am here, I've booked out the afternoon. I am here to take as many questions as you all want. Carrie and Ryan, I couldn't see any questions on my end. Maybe it's just because I'm a panelist. It's no big deal.
Yeah, no worries. It looks like we do have a couple questions here. One of them here is going to be, what effect will the new regulations have on those of us that use drones to assist farmers and ranchers?
Yeah, so what he or she is mentioning there is probably talking about remote ID and talking about farmers and ranchers just out in a very remote area. So they are going to have provisions for remote ID in places where there just isn't Wi-Fi or cellular coverage or anything along those lines. You can still play by the rules of remote ID even in remote places. So don't sweat that. That is certainly something they've been talking about. And again, I'm not here. Don't think I'm like an advocate for remote ID by any means. I was just as skeptical at the beginning as you all are, and I still want to see it implemented. We're 2 years out from remote ID being a fact of our daily lives. So they still have a lot of kinks to work out. But it's my understanding they have a game plan for working off the grid, essentially.
Great, yeah. So. And Mark here has a question saying, you still need to be 5 miles away from airports. And I think you kind of addressed that with the Lance, but if you wanted to kind of follow up with that.
Sure. Well, and you can take it a step further. So, Mark, it depends on you. So, Mark, if you are a Part 107 certificated pilot, let me go back a slide. Oops, let me play this again. Sorry, my bad. You play by the Lance rules, my friend. You're gonna use whatever app you want to use to get your permission to fly in that airspace. You're a Part 107 certificated pilot. Use the Lance system like that. If you are just a hobbyist, Mark, then you're going to use something like the Before You Fly app, and it's going to point out every little airport, every grass strip, every hospital, heliport, everywhere. Sometimes I look at the Before You Fly app and I'm like, there is nowhere I can fly here, according to this thing. I live in the middle of nowhere. So if you're just a hobbyist, yes, you're still going to fall in those limitations at the 5 miles from an airport. This is why, again, you think I'm saying this just because I have the Part 107 test prep course. That's not the case. I'm saying that simply because you become a Part 107 operator, the world opens up to you. You're not as limited as you are as just a hobbyist. Even if you want to never make $1 from Part 107, just to use it to open up the world to yourself, it's worth 150 euro. Now the test is 160 bucks. They just raised the prices. So
Great. Frank was asking, do any drones currently transmit a remote ID?
So great question, Frank. So as far as remote ID, they haven't officially established what is going to be that remote ID signal. Originally, Frank, if you would have asked that question, say 6 months ago, I would have said, I think so, because I thought it was going to be an ADS-B signal. It is not going to be an ADS-B signal based on my market intelligence. So I would have said, hey, the Mavic Enterprise is taking ADS-B in. Maybe we can do some ADS-B out with it and let it broadcast that signal, but that is not the case right now. So not at this time, since it's not going to be an ADS-B solution. The reason it's not going to be an ADS-B solution, and just to summarize, what is ADS-B? ADS-B is the new means for ATC to track aircraft now, manned aircraft. So in all my airplanes, I just had to install. Remember I told you the story about the Mode C transponder? Well, they wanted us now to take those out. Now we're putting in ADS-B. It just allows controllers to see us that much better. They add it to all the ground crew and the tugs that are on the ground at Delta and the cars that drive around the airport. They all have ADS-B now. They were worried with drones having ADS-B since there's just so many of us drone pilots. They were worried about it cluttering up controller screens just because there'd be so much to see if you look at like Atlanta or something like that. So Frank, long answer to a short question. I apologize. Not at this time, unless there's some top secret home builds that I don't know about, because we're not using ADS-B for the remote ID signal.
Here's a kind of interesting question. James has his Part 107 expired on May 10th, and now that the testing centers are closed due to COVID, what are his options?
Yep, James. So
I don't know if you
head over. Yeah, James is not alone in this. James, head over to the Remote Pilot 101 YouTube. Go watch like 2 videos ago, maybe. The FAA issued what's called an SBAR, a special federal aviation regulation for people just like yourself who said, listen, I expired, I still want to operate, but all the testing centers near me are closed. PSI closed 657, I believe, of their own testing centers. And I don't believe they're open yet across the country. There's still some mom and pop ones that are open, but if PSI, that's who proctors your tests, actually owned the facility, they're closed. So it is hard to come by a testing center. So the FAA issued an SFAR, I believe it was James, that is going to extend you if you do X amount of criteria. I don't have all of that criteria in front of me. I apologize, but it is all in that video. So you can extend the taking of your recurrent tests. You will still have to take your recurrent tests. I believe you go take the FAA safety.gov course online, and that buys you, I think, 3 months, but you still have to take your actual recurrent tests within 3 months. So you're not getting out of the recurrent test, but you can buy yourself 3 months by taking the online course. And I think there's one other thing that slips my mind right now, but you can find it in that video.
Beautiful. Another question from another James here is, with UTM and remote ID, how will these affect public safety with their use of UAS?
Great question, James. I'm hoping it doesn't. I am hoping, think back, if those of you who've been doing this a while, think back to the 333 days. Think back to, I mean, law enforcement could just go get a COA, essentially. And if you're in law enforcement, you know what I'm talking about when I say a COA, just to operate and be smart, be safe, but operate under your own little rules and that sort of stuff. I am hoping and praying, because I know how this works in the first responder space, is you don't know when something's going to happen. You don't know when the chase is going to be, or the hostage situation, or whatever that may be. I'm talking law enforcement here, or fire as well. If that airspace is clogged, they're going to need a system to divert the UTM traffic away from that scene. We do it in manned aviation. I cannot go fly over like a large forest fire if there's a TFR around it. I can't fly over certain sporting events. They divert us around it. They're going to have to do the same thing and add an instantaneous type moment as well for our first responders, public safety, etc. Don't know those answers, James. That might just be you and I dreaming. But I dream big. So that is what I'm hoping is going to come of it. I'm not saying that's factual. So don't mishear me, but that's what I hope would happen.
You know, I have a couple of people here just kind of wanting more of a general rundown of what remote ID is, and why it's so important. If you're kind of able to follow up on some of that.
I totally apologize. Sometimes I have to look back at this with student pilot eyes. You know, when you live it every single day, you use acronyms that may not be familiar. So I truly apologize. That's my bad. So a few months ago, the FAA came out with this idea of remote ID, and it's the ability for the FAA, as well, they're talking about extending it to local law enforcement, which I am honestly for, to have an electronic signature of every drone that flies in the sky. Basically, you would not be able to fly unless you were broadcasting a remote ID signal. It's to keep the airspace safer. It's to keep our citizens safer. Think about it. I mean, look back. Look what happened just last week, with the kid that busted the TFR for the Blue Angels flyover. Now they found him. They only found him because he uploaded his video, and they were able to figure it out from there. And he uploaded it to his own channel, and they just subpoenaed YouTube or whatever they did, and they got it that way. However, with a service like remote ID, they would say, hey, this drone that's registered to Joe Smith, who lives here, is flying this TFR right now. We need to go investigate this thing, get this drone down. And they're going to go find Joe Smith. It's to wrestle in the bad guys, the ones who are breaking airspace regulations. Remember a few years ago, too, the kid that flew in New York's Hudson River and impacted the military helicopter. The drone hit the military helicopter, if you recall, and thankfully no issues other than a busted up Phantom 3, I believe. They were able to track that down from serial numbers and everything else on the drone. With remote ID, that would have never even happened. They would have been dispatched and able to handle that situation a lot better. So what everyone's freaking out about with remote ID is, oh, this is Big Brother watching me. This is super creepy stuff. This is why I say, if you're playing by the rules, it's no big deal. You have a license plate on your car, right? You follow the rules. You still speed sometimes too. You still run that yellow light when you should and whatever it is, and they take a picture of your plate and you get a nice little ticket in the mail if you do that. It's no different. I can't just go Google Ryan's license plate and get all Ryan's data. Public safety can, though, and pull all that information up if they have reasonable cause. The same is going to be true of remote ID. They're going to work everything that way. So that's how it's going to work. Think of it like a digital license plate for your drone, essentially. And you have to participate, basically, if you want to fly in the National Airspace System. Where everyone else is making a big stink is if you don't wish to participate, the only place you can fly is at an AMA field. An AMA field is the Academy of Model Aeronautics, and it's where the guys fly the RC planes. That's the only place you'd legally be able to fly your drones. That will be at an AMA field. And there's not too many of those left much anymore if you chose to operate without remote ID. The next question, to save you one, Ryan, because this is going to come up, is, well, what happens to all my old drones? I've just invested $6,000 in this Inspire 2. I've got every Mavic DJI has ever made. I've got this Autel product. I've got everything. I unfortunately don't know those answers. If I am also very much a capitalist, so if somebody wants to be really, really smart, you would be researching remote ID and going, how can I create an aftermarket approved remote ID device to retrofit how many is it? I think there's a million drones registered right now. There's a market demand for such a thing. So my entrepreneurs listening to this call, just cut me in 10% on the deal, and we'll run with it.
You definitely answered the follow-up before I got around to it. So yes, that was definitely on the list here. Another big one people are asking is about the recurrent test. First off, is it the same price? Is it the same amount of questions? Is it the same amount of difficulty? And what they should expect?
Great, great. So the recurrent test, unfortunately, it is the same price. PSI has a monopoly. Back in the day, we used to have PSI, CATS, and laser grade, all that produced test prep, and they kept the prices low. Again, I love capitalism. PSI went and bought everybody. PSI bought CATS, PSI bought laser grade, and now it's just PSI. So there's a monopoly on test prep, so they can charge whatever their little heart desires. Good for them, I guess. But it's $160 now, any remote pilot test. Our course, obviously, if you buy our course, it's $149. You get it for life. You get the initial and the recurrent test prep. You could just buy the recurrent test from us, I believe it's $67. You could just buy that as well if you wanted to. And again, it's for life. Is it different? Yes, it's different. That's why we had to make an entire course, because it is different. You're not going to get the weather question. So that very first question we started with about the TAF, that will not be on your recurrent test. So you can, breathe a sigh of relief. You don't have to go back to remembering TAFs and METARs and all that sort of stuff. Weather is not going to play a part in your recurrent test, nor will like loading and performance questions. Remember all those aft CG and forward CG and load factors and G loading questions? Those will not be on your recurrent test as well. Is it harder? I'm going to say yes. Here's why. So your initial test was 60 questions, all right? 60 questions, I need to get a 70, I can get 18 wrong. No big deal. Your recurrent test, it's 40 questions. I still need to get the same 70%. I can't get as many wrong. Every wrong one is worth a lot more in the points department. So you just want to be careful with that, because it is a smaller test. Go slow, truly study. Nobody wants to fail and have a failure on the record and then have to go pay another $160 to retake the test. So that's that.
Yeah, that's great. Jeremy actually has a good question here. How up to date is the content on Remote Pilot 101?
Jeremy, this is a beautiful question. We are always updating it, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much, but there is a new version coming in one of the months that starts with a J. I won't say which, but it's coming. You can still very much study with our current material. We have hundreds of students pass literally every single week, even during the coronavirus. We're in the tens of thousands of students passed with literally 3 or 4 failures. And I would argue that some of our failures were they just didn't study hard enough based on, looking at their course data they went through and everything else. Not a knock on anybody, but yeah, it's very up to date, Jeremy, and it's about to get even better. Not revealing too much, but something big is coming.
Yeah, and I can definitely vouch for that. I have gone through the entire course myself, and it is without a doubt the best place to learn everything you need to know about the Part 107. So he is not lying there. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Will you need to have the Part 107 certification in order to operate with remote ID, or is that going to be required across the board?
It's a really good question. No, it's going to be the other way around. You're gonna buy a drone that will be already equipped with remote ID, is my understanding of this. So if you wish to disable that remote ID or not use it, you'd have to fly at one of the AMA fields. They're going to come out of the box ready to rock and roll. So you're going to have to abide by remote ID. That's why they say it's going to be such a killer for hobbyists, because basically out of the box, you're going to need to have your Part 107 if you want to do anything fun with it. Which now think back to the poor kid, 16 years old on Christmas, gets a DJI 7 or whatever, Phantom 7, whatever we're on by then. Yeah, it's going to pose an issue. There's going to have to be some literature in there. But what a 16-year-old kid opens up his new Phantom and doesn't read the instructions. His first question is, how high can it go? How fast can it go? And that's a dangerous mindset right there too. So there's a lot of market education that I have to do, Multicopter Warehouse has to do, the FAA has to do. Everyone on this webinar right now, we need to be educators in this process and ambassadors for our craft, for sure.
Another good question here from Roger is, with cinematic FPV drones becoming more prominent, how do you see custom-built quads being regulated?
First off, I absolutely love it. I am a big like Cinewhoop fan and everything else. Some of the shots, I could just sit and watch some of these things on YouTube forever. Did you guys see the one, the FPV through the Mercedes Museum that just came out the other day? I mean, like, so there's some incredible stuff cinematically that's out there. So this is my thought process. And I don't know, again, this is perhaps Jason just dreaming. I don't have the facts to back this up, but I would imagine they're going to relate it very similar to manned aviation. In manned aviation, we have our certified aircraft. Those are the ones built by Cessna, built by Piper, built by Cirrus. These are all names you've heard of. Then there's an entirely different category called experimental category. And experimental are home-built or kit-built aircraft. Vans RV is one of the biggest. And just like you can build an airplane. That sounds, it's super, super safe, and it's a wonderful segment of manned aviation. I would imagine there could be an experimental category of drones and kit-built drones and experimental drones that could play by their own rules and maybe use remote ID if they want or not use remote ID if they want, is going to become a market segment. So again, another business opportunity perhaps. I believe that could be a flourishing market segment here in the near future. It'll certainly be more affordable and perhaps a little more open as well. But then again, it goes back to, if you want to play by the rules remote ID, you're going to need some aftermarket solution. So my entrepreneurs need to get to work on that one.
All right. Jeff here had a question back to the remote ID, and I'm not sure if you have the answer to this, but he was asking what the penalties would be for folks who decide not to retrofit their current UAS with remote ID.
Great question, Jeff. Again, answers I don't have. We'll find out in 2 years when the first person breaks that rule to see what they actually do. Is it a slap on the wrist from the FAA? Is it a local law enforcement violation? Because remember, their goal is that local law enforcement can see this sort of stuff. So what would happen, Jeff, if you got in your car right now and drove without a license plate or without a driver's license? You're going to get a ticket. You're not going to jail or anything crazy, but you're going to get a fine and a ticket, and you can either fight it or just pay it. I would imagine that it would be a very similar situation. And I would also imagine this remote ID could be enforced even at the local law enforcement type level. Again, just my thoughts on that. I'm not saying that's true or coming to fruition, but that could be one of the many ways they work it.
Yeah, but this is going to be one of those kind of wait and see situations, it sounds like.
Absolutely. We've got like 2 years roughly till remote ID really starts to swing out mainstream.
Great. Yeah. Do we have any more questions for anyone out there? Give it a second or two here.
I'm here to serve you guys. So anything we can do. And if you're not already with Remote Pilot 101, don't buy it until you use the Multicopter Warehouse promo code as well. Just so you have all that and just save yourself some money. I'd rather you spend money on drones than spend money with us too. So any other questions on your end, Ryan, that you see?
It looks like the last one here would be, is it a possibility that it would be a firmware update to install the remote ID on existing drones?
Wow, that would be incredible. My fear would be, the Inspire 1, which is still a decent little platform. Were they even thinking this far ahead to have that level of firmware? Does the technology to broadcast out exist on like an Inspire 1 or a Phantom 3 or a Phantom 4 that were all, even the Inspire 2, engineered before remote ID was even just ID on someone's whiteboard? I don't know those answers. It would be very cool if it was, but I don't know if we have that broadcast capability to just make it a simple firmware upgrade. I would love it. It'd be way more affordable, but I don't know those answers.
Tom was asking if there is a testing center online that is approved.
There is not right now. So how the FAA exams work is they have to be proctored, just like back in the day when you took your SATs. They watched you take it. It was proctored. They watched you on a camera. You took it in a room where the proctor sat in the room with you. They gave you the pencil. They gave you the paper. They checked your pockets. It's exactly like that. I don't see that anywhere in the near future of them moving away from such a model. Because how would the FAA regulate cheating or someone else taking the test on your behalf and everything else? It will, in the foreseeable future, continue to be a proctored test. Now, with this abundance now of remote work, myself included, I'm loving working from home and everything else. Is my first weeks back at the office now, though, because of the coronavirus. Maybe they'll pivot. I don't know, but how can we verify you are who you say you are and you're not cheating on a remotely taken test that still needs to be proctored? They're going to watch me on Skype all day. I don't know what they would do. But there could be options to that in the future. I don't see it in the foreseeable future, though.
Another good one here is, how does operating on a tether interact with Part 107?
This is a phenomenal question is what it is. So you still have to realize, though, anything that leaves the ground is still going to enter into the National Airspace System. So even off of a tether, and we do a lot of work with FDNY, Fire Department of New York. They're using tethered drones with thermal cameras to fight fires and see where it's the hottest and where the issues are. You're still entering the National Airspace System. Yes, you're on a tether. You're still going to have to end up having a remote ID based on my knowledge of it.
Great.
Good question.
Do you anticipate recertification testing going to 5 years?
Wow, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? I haven't heard such a thing. Speaking of that, I'm surprised no one has brought this up. Before we move to certification going to 5 years, they're working on a hobbyist test right now that I am 99.9% positive we're going to have a test to even want to be a hobbyist in the coming years, not months, but years. That may be an online test, maybe not a proctored one. Again, all this to say, just go get your Part 107. It's going to make your life way, way easier. That's not a sales pitch. That's just the honest truth. But I haven't heard about 5 years. I think it'd be super cool. Watch for the hobbyist test, though, my hobbyists that are listening to this, because that is, I can say with 99.9% certainty, going to become a thing. And we will certainly have your back on test prep for that as well.
Here's a good question as well, is now with the Mavic Mini being under 0.55 pounds, how does this affect drones like that?
Yep, so keep that in mind. So yes, you don't need to register it if you want to operate as a hobbyist, but if you want to operate for commercial purposes, remember the definition in Part 107 says your drone also needs to be registered. So I have a Mini, it is registered, just because I want to use it for Part 107 operations, even though, you know, the camera may not compete with what I need to do on some of the operations. So we'll take the Inspire out or the Mavic Enterprise out instead. We still registered it just to have it. So if you want to operate the National Airspace System using things like Lance, you'll need to be registered. Where does the Mavic Mini fit into remote ID? Again, it's still a drone. It will be operating the National Airspace System. My bet is they're going to want remote ID on it. The weight limit is just for registration purposes.
And Tony was asking here if he can fly for money while he's getting his Part 107.
Tony, great question, but the answer is no, unfortunately. The day you pass your test, it's fair game, man. Go for it. And it's not just money. This goes to Tony and everybody else. The definition is for compensation or hire. So what if I say to you, hey, Tony, I need a new Facebook ad. Can you come fly over the Remote Pilot 101 World Headquarters here? And I want to post it on Facebook. And you say, absolutely, Jason, I'd love to do that. However, I'm using Tony's work to further my business. I didn't pay Tony or anything, right? So Tony's going, I didn't get compensated for that. Yet, Tony, you are creating content for someone to use in the furtherance of a business. There's a lot of gray area there. I just don't want Tony or anybody to get a slap on the wrist for that. The definition is in furtherance of a business with that. All right. So just be careful if you're working even to further business. Your buddy's a realtor and says, hey, can you help me out? I just need some photos for this new property I'm gonna get listed. You're helping someone further their business. You need to be Part 107 certificated.
And now when you pass the test, you will get a temporary Part 107, is that correct?
Yep, so what you'll do, you'll pass your test, you'll take it. Yep, you take it home, you go to IACRA, it's called. I have a whole video on how to do this inside the course. You enter in all your information and they'll issue a temporary certificate right there. Then the hard copy certificate takes about 90 days to come in the mail.
And then that afternoon, Tony, you can go out and start making some money.
Absolutely. That's the
Okay,
exciting part.
cool. Let's see here. Do we have any more questions out there? I'm not seeing any more come through. Jason, if you want to pass it back to me here.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Let me go back to sharing here, change presenter. Back to you, my friend.
Perfect. All right, and that discount code here that we guys were telling you guys about is DGI Co. So if you head to the Remote Pilot 101, use this upon purchase. As Jason mentioned, it is a lifelong membership that you will receive, which is great for going back to when you need to study up for your recurrent test and just to kind of keep in the know of all things Part 107. But that will be your go-to for getting this course. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me just make sure there's no more questions here.
Sure.
One sec. To everyone asking if the webinar will be available, the recording will be sent out tomorrow along with the certification of completion. And if you guys had any other follow-up questions about anything here, feel free to send us an email at info@multicopterwarehouse.com. Or if you have any general drone questions at all, we'd love to help you out. Thanks again, Jason, and we will talk to you guys later.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful work week, guys. We're here. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
All right. You take care, Jason.
See you, man.